Ever been betrayed by someone you loved? I was left standing at the airport, my heart shattered, but that moment changed everything for me. I chose to walk away, not out of anger, but because I realized my life was mine to live. This story is not just about betrayal, it's about self-discovery, strength, and finding your own path. If you've ever felt lost or stuck, this video will remind you that it's never too late to change your story. Like, comment, and subscribe to join me on this journey of reclaiming your life. Remember, the only one who can rewrite your story is you. I stood there at the airport, my suitcase still in hand, watching Charlotte's private jet lift off into the sky without me. The roar of the engines echoed in my chest like a heavy, unspoken truth. My name is Ethan Winters, and this was supposed to be our big anniversary weekend, the one we'd been planning for months. A romantic getaway she had promised me since January. At least, that's what I thought. I had packed my best shirts, bought a new camera lens for the moments I imagined we'd share. But there she was, laughing with her entourage of assistants and friends, all dressed to the nines in designer sunglasses and heels that clicked like they owned the world. "This is a girl's trip now," she'd said, tossing me that smirk, the one that always made me feel like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't get. I could have yelled, could have made a scene right there in the terminal, but I didn't. I wasn't the begging type. I wasn't going to chase her, not this time. Her laughter lingered in my head as I turned on my heel, walked straight to the first-class desk, and asked for the next flight to Paris. The lady behind the counter barely blinked as I handed over my miles and cash. In less than an hour, I was buckled into a plush seat, sipping coffee, while the plane taxied down the runway. I wasn't chasing her, I was leaving her behind. 10 minutes after her jet took off, I knew she'd get the email I'd scheduled earlier that morning. It was a little automated surprise, set up with just a few clicks. The subject line: Preliminary Separation Agreement. I could picture her face, those perfectly arched brows shooting up in disbelief, her lips parting in that silent gasp she always made when she was caught off guard. She would be 30,000 feet in the air, surrounded by her giggling crew, and suddenly, the ground would drop from beneath her. The thought almost made me smile, but I didn't. I just sat back and let the plane carry me further away from her. By the time I landed in Paris, my phone was buzzing non-stop. 155 messages. I didn't check it, didn't need to. I let it vibrate in my pocket as I stepped into the warm chaos of Charles de Gaulle Airport. The messages were a blur of apologies, rants, and pleas, 155 of them, typed while I was sipping wine over the Atlantic. But right then, I didn't care. I was in Paris, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't about her. It was about me. I grabbed my bag, adjusted my jacket, and walked out into the city that was about to change everything. The air smelled like fresh bread, like freedom, and I wasn't looking back. Charlotte could keep her jet, her entourage, her smirks. I had a ticket to something better, and I wasn't waiting for her to sign off on it. Paris was mine now, and for the first time in a long time, I was living for myself. The moment I stepped out of the airport and into the streets of Paris, the city hit me like a wave rush of air, a blend of old and new. The hustle of the city was intoxicating, and for the first time in ages, I felt alive. No more Charlotte's tight grip on every moment. No more pretending to be part of her perfect little world. I was free, even if just for this one day, and I planned to make it count. I wandered through the streets, aimlessly at first, my camera hanging round my neck like it was part of me. I hadn't really used it in years, not since. Charlotte started using it for her endless brand promotions and Instagram shots. Photography used to be my escape, my way of capturing life as I saw it, but it had faded into the background like everything else in my life. But now, with the lens pressed to my eye, the world felt new. Paris wasn't just a city, it was a canvas, and I was painting it with every click of the shutter. The cobblestone streets wound around me, full of life and stories I couldn't wait to uncover. I stopped for a croissant at a little bakery. The flaky pastry melted in my mouth, and the coffee was so strong it burned my tongue. I was never a fan of the bitter stuff, but somehow here it tasted different. It tasted like freedom. I sat at one of the wobbly tables outside, watching people go by. Artists, tourists, locals, it didn't matter who they were. For once, no one knew my name. No one expected anything from me. I was just another face in the crowd, and I liked it. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't help but think about the last few years, how everything had been planned for me, how my identity had become so wrapped up in Charlotte's life that I didn't know where I ended and she began. But Paris, this city, it was different. It was forcing me to face who I was without her, without the distractions of her success, her image. For the first time in ages, I felt like I had room to breathe. I didn't have a plan for the day. Charlotte would have had everything mapped out, press calls, meetings, photo ops. But I was here, alone, and I was going to let Paris tell me what I needed to do next. I decided to just walk, to see where the city would take me. The streets led me to an art district, quiet little neighborhood, tucked away from the usual tourist bustle. I wandered in, taking pictures of anything and everything that caught my eye. Old doors with chipped paint, street signs rusted with age. A woman in a red scarf walking briskly through the narrow alley. Each scene felt like it had a story to tell, and I was capturing it all. It wasn't long before I bumped into someone. She was standing in front of a gallery, looking at a piece of art through the window. The artist in me immediately noticed the way she tilted her head, examining the work. She wasn't just looking, she was absorbing it, letting it speak to her. I stepped up to the door and said, "You like it?" She turned, a little surprised, and smiled. "I do, actually, but I think it's missing something." "What's that?" She paused for a moment, then shrugged. "I don't know, a story. Art without a story feels incomplete." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's a good point. Art is nothing without context, right?" She nodded. "Exactly. What's your story?" I blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever asked me that question. Certainly not Charlotte, who always had the story she wanted to tell, the life she wanted to lead. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I'm working on it." She smiled again, a knowing look in her eyes. "You're in Paris. That's a good place to start." Her words stuck with me long after we parted ways. I'd always lived for someone else's story, Charlotte's story. But now, I realized I had the chance to rewrite my own. The blank pages of my life were staring back at me, and it was up to me what I filled them with. As the day wore on, I continued exploring, taking in the sights and sounds of Paris. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I wasn't worried. I wasn't afraid to be alone, to figure things out on my own. This was my chance to rebuild, to redefine who I was without the weight of Charlotte's world hanging over me. By the time the sun began to set, I found myself at a small rooftop cafe. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and I could see the Eiffel Tower in the distance, its silhouette bathed in the evening light. I ordered a glass of wine sitting back and letting the atmosphere soak in. The noise of the city faded into the background, and all that was left was me and the city, finally at peace. Paris was changing me, piece by piece, and I was finally ready to accept it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Paris breathing, the faint hum of traffic, the soft murmur of voices from the street below, all blending together in a symphony of city life. I stretched, feeling the warmth of the early morning sun filtering through the curtains. For the first time in a long while, I didn't wake up with a knot in my stomach, wondering what Charlotte was doing or where I had to be. I was here in Paris, and the day ahead was entirely mine to shape. I grabbed a quick breakfast at the hotel, nothing fancy, just some fresh fruit and a croissant, and stepped out into the streets of Montmartre. The district was waking up, locals bustling about, opening shops and greeting one another with warm smiles. I walked slowly, savoring the freedom that came with being no one special in a city full of stories. As I walked, I found myself reflecting on the past few days. Paris wasn't just an escape, it was a revelation. It was a place where I could rediscover parts of myself I'd forgotten, or maybe never truly knew. Photography, for example. I had packed my camera on a whim, thinking I might snap a few pictures for old time's sake. But now, it felt like more than just a hobby. It was a language I hadn't spoken in years. Every shot was a sentence, every frame a story, and I was the author. I made my way to an art district just outside of the main tourist areas, a quiet neighborhood filled with galleries and small workshops. There was something about the place that felt alive with possibility. The walls were plastered with paintings, the windows displaying sculptures and sketches that beckoned me to come closer. I wandered through, snapping pictures as I went, stopping to take in the work that seemed to speak to me without words. Then I saw her, Sophie. She was standing outside a small gallery, her long black hair flowing in the breeze as she adjusted a large canvas on an easel. Her eyes were focused, absorbed in her work, as if the world around her didn't exist. There was something captivating about her, something that made me want to stop and watch. I hesitated for a moment before walking up to her. "Excuse me," I said, my voice catching slightly. "You're an artist, right?" She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine with a steady gaze. "I am," she said, offering a small smile. "What about you?" "I'm just rediscovering my camera," I said, glancing down at the lens hanging round my neck. "It's been a while since I've really used it. What's this piece you're working on?" She looked at the canvas, then back at me. "It's about transformation," she said softly. "How we all change, whether we want to or not. Sometimes it's painful, but it's necessary. Like peeling away layers to find the truth underneath." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them. Transformation. That was exactly what I was going through. The past few days had felt like peeling away the layers of a life I never really chose for myself. The life I'd lived with Charlotte, the glamorous events, the endless photo ops, the feeling of being reduced to nothing more than a prop in her perfect world. I'd been living her story, not mine. "I know the feeling," I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "I think I'm going through something similar." She raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What's your story, then?" I paused, thinking about the question. What was my story? I had spent so many years being defined by someone else, someone else's goals, someone else's dreams. But now, here I was, in Paris, standing in front of an artist who seemed to have it all figured out. "I'm trying to find it," I said, feeling a strange sense of clarity. "My own story, I mean." Sophie smiled at that, as if she understood exactly what I was talking about. "Well," she said, glancing at the canvas again, "you're in the right place. Paris has a way of helping people find themselves." We talked for a while longer, and she told me about her own journey as an artist, how she had left everything behind to follow her passion, how the city had given her a new perspective on life and art. Her words resonated deeply with me. Maybe Paris wasn't just a place to escape from Charlotte. Maybe it was the place where I could finally start over, find my own path. After our conversation, Sophie invited me to a workshop she was hosting the next day. "It's about digital self-portraits," she explained, "but not the kind you post online. We're breaking ourselves down, deconstructing who we think we are to find what's really inside." I agreed to attend, intrigued by the idea. It sounded like exactly what I needed, a way to confront the person I had become and start reassembling myself into something real, something that was mine and mine alone. The rest of the day was spent wandering the streets of Paris, camera in hand. I took photos of anything that caught my eye: the crumbling facades of old buildings, the shadows of trees stretching across the pavement, the faces of strangers passing by. With each click, I felt more and more like I was piecing together a new version of myself. That night, as I sat in a small cafe, sipping wine and watching the world go by, I realized something. I had been living in the shadows for so long, waiting for Charlotte's approval, chasing her dreams. But now, in Paris, I was learning to live for myself, and I wasn't looking back. Tomorrow, I would take the next step in this journey. The workshop with Sophie was just the beginning. I didn't know exactly where it would lead, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The morning came quicker than I expected, and despite the buzz of excitement that had filled me the night before, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Today was the day I would confront the past. Not just by facing my own reflection, but by stepping back into a world I had left behind, Charlotte's world. I dressed quickly, pulling on a simple jacket and jeans. I didn't want to impress anyone. I didn't need to. This wasn't about appearances. I grabbed my camera, as usual, as if it were my shield, my constant companion. The streets of Paris greeted me as if nothing had changed. Yet I could feel the weight of what was to come pressing against me. I made my way to the small gallery Sophie had mentioned, a little studio tucked away near the river in the heart of Paris. It wasn't the kind of place Charlotte would have ever chosen for an exhibition, no glitzy venue or red carpet. This place was raw, real. The worn wooden floors, the soft hum of people talking about the art, they made it feel alive, like it had its own heartbeat. When I arrived, the atmosphere was already buzzing with energy. Artists and photographers were setting up their workstations, arranging digital tablets and projectors. Sophie was there, her sleeves rolled up as she spoke to a small group of people gathered around a table, showing them how to manipulate images, break down their portraits to reveal something deeper, more truthful. She spotted me from across the room and waved me over. "You made it," she said, her voice warm. But there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, like she understood more than she was letting on. "You ready for this?" I nodded, trying to swallow the anxiety that was bubbling up inside me. I didn't know what I was expecting. What was I really going to find by deconstructing myself? Was I ready to face what was buried beneath the layers I had spent years hiding behind? Sophie handed me a tablet and showed me how to upload a picture. "Start with something you know," she instructed. I tapped my screen, scrolling through my photo library until I found it. The picture Charlotte had posted of us at some gala months ago. I had barely remembered the moment, but there we were, me in the background, Charlotte in the spotlight, my smile frozen in place, like I was just another accessory to her. It wasn't just the picture that bothered me, it was what it represented. The endless public appearances, the way I had faded into the background, a prop in the story she told the world. I felt the familiar ache in my chest as I uploaded the image. "Good choice," Sophie said, looking over my shoulder. "Now, let's take it apart." I didn't hesitate. I dragged the tool across Charlotte's figure, erasing her from the image bit by bit. Her dress disappeared, her face blurred into nothing. Slowly, the image morphed into something new. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. At first, a jumbled mess of pixels, a distorted figure standing in front of an empty backdrop. But as I kept working, I began to see it more clearly. I was standing there, not as the background figure, but as the focus, the center of the image. My silhouette came into focus, gradually filling in the gaps. Sophie watched quietly, her expression unreadable. I kept working, not knowing what exactly I was trying to find, but feeling a strange sense of liberation as I erased the remnants of her. It wasn't just the picture I was deconstructing, it was my life with Charlotte, the years spent living in her shadow. The more I worked, the clearer the image became. I started adding elements from my life shots of Paris, the streets I'd walked, the people I'd met. Slowly, the image began to reflect who I was, not who I had been for her. It was messy, it wasn't perfect, but it felt real. For the first time in a long time, I saw myself as I truly was. Sophie didn't say anything for a while, but when I looked up, she gave me a nod of approval. "That's it," she said softly. "You're breaking free, piece by piece." I stared at the image on the screen, taking in the figure standing in the center of it all. It was me, but it was more than that. It was the version of me I had been too afraid to confront until now. The one who didn't need to hide behind someone else's life, who didn't have to apologize for wanting to exist outside of Charlotte's shadow. The others in the workshop had moved on to their own portraits, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was like I had uncovered a new part of myself, something I had buried so deep I wasn't sure it still existed, but it did. I had always known there was more to me than the role I'd played in Charlotte's world, and now I was finally starting to see it clearly. As the hours passed, I continued to work on my pieces, creating a series of images, portraits of myself, stripped of the layers that Charlotte had placed on me, revealing the raw, untapped parts of who I was. I wasn't just erasing her, I was building something new, something that felt entirely mine. By the end of the workshop, I had a collection of digital portraits, each one representing a different aspect of my journey. Some were broken, fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. Others were more complete, as if I was finally starting to put the pieces back in place. Sophie walked over and gave me a small smile. "You've done something amazing here," she said, glancing at the screen. "This isn't just art, it's you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. For once, I felt like I had created something real. Something that wasn't for Charlotte's approval, wasn't for anyone else but me. It felt like I was finally starting to reclaim my own narrative, to rewrite the story of my life on my own terms. When the workshop ended, Sophie invited me to stay and help set up for an exhibition. "Why don't you showcase these?" she suggested. "You've made something incredible here, Ethan. People need to see it." I hesitated. The idea of putting myself out there, of showing my work to the world, was terrifying. But it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. "I'll do it," I said, a quiet determination settling over me. Sophie smiled, and I knew I had made the right choice. This wasn't just about art anymore. It was about finding my voice, standing up for myself, and showing the world who I truly was. The gallery was everything I hadn't expected draw, unpolished and alive with energy. I stood at the entrance, my fingers twitching with nervous anticipation. This wasn't just an exhibition. It was the culmination of everything I'd discovered about myself over the past few days. These images, these fractured, imperfect pieces of me were finally being seen. They were no longer buried behind the walls I had spent years building around myself. I had ripped those walls down, one pixel at a time. Sophie was there, making last-minute adjustments to the lighting, ensuring each portrait was perfectly placed. The air buzzed with excitement, and though I could feel my heart racing, I didn't want to leave. This was my moment, and for the first time, I was standing at the center of it, not as a backdrop to someone else's success, but as the person I had always been capable of becoming. The doors opened to a trickle of people. Some were locals, others were tourists, wandering into the space as if they had discovered something special, something hidden in plain sight. They weren't here to see Charlotte's brand or to discuss the latest luxury tech trends. They were here for me. The thought still sent a shiver down my spine. I mingled awkwardly at first, greeting people who complimented the work, some of them even stopping to ask questions about the process. I wasn't used to this, used to being the one who hovered in the background, nodding politely while Charlotte took the spotlight. But now, it was different. People were looking at me. They were interested in my story. "You're the man behind this?" a young woman asked, pointing to one of the portraits of me, standing tall in the Paris streets, framed against a backdrop of twinkling lights. She seemed genuinely interested, and I found myself smiling, for real. "I guess so," I replied. "It's a work in progress." The woman nodded, impressed. "It's beautiful," she said. "There's something raw about it, like it's capturing a moment of real change." I didn't respond right away, but her words lingered in my mind. Roth, that's what these portraits were, real. For once, there was no facade, no image of the perfect husband, no smile to fit the Instagram caption, no perfectly curated life. This was me, broken apart and put back together, reclaiming my identity one frame at a time. I turned to Sophie, who was standing by the door, greeting more people as they came in. "I didn't think I'd make it this far," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You were always capable of it, Ethan. You just had to see it for yourself." I didn't know what to say to that. She had been right there beside me, guiding me, helping me tear down the walls I'd built up over the years. Without her encouragement, without her unwavering belief in the process, I don't think I would have ever gotten here. The evening stretched on, and the crowd grew. More people filtered in, and as the night deepened, the gallery buzzed with lively conversations. It wasn't long before someone from the local press approached me, asking if they could feature one of my pieces in an upcoming article. I was taken aback, but Sophie was right there, nudging me forward. "You should do it," she whispered. "This is your time." I took a deep breath and agreed, my stomach twisting with both excitement and nerves. The thought of having my work published, of people seeing me for who I really was overwhelming. But it felt right. It felt like something I had earned, something I wasn't going to let slip away. As the night wore on, the last few guests began to trickle out, and I found myself standing alone in the gallery, taking in the empty space. My portraits lined the walls, each one a piece of my journey. And for the first time, I wasn't just observing it, I was a part of it. A familiar voice broke through the silence, and I turned to see Marco walking through the door. He spotted me immediately, raising a glass in my direction. "Well, well," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "Look at you, making waves in Paris. I knew you had it in you." I chuckled, feeling a sense of relief at his presence. "I didn't think this would happen," I admitted. "But I guess sometimes you just have to go for it." Marco nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "It's more than just a show, Ethan. You've built something here. Something real." I shrugged, feeling a little awkward. "It's not perfect, but it's mine. And that's the difference," Marco said, his voice serious now. "You've always let her take credit for things, let her shape the narrative. But now, this is all you, and people are noticing." I felt a swell of pride in my chest. The truth of his words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't just been letting Charlotte take the credit, I had been living in her shadow, terrified to step out and claim my own life. But now, I was doing it. I was standing tall and showing the world who I really was, not as her husband, but as Ethan Winters, the man I had always been meant to be. Marco clapped me on the back, his grin returning. "You're a hit, my friend. Keep this up, and you'll have more galleries knocking at your door than you know what to do with." I smiled, but my mind was already racing ahead. I wasn't thinking about the press articles, the sales, or the praise. I was thinking about what came next. This gallery, this moment, was just the beginning. When the night finally wound down, Sophie and I stood outside the gallery, taking a breath in the cool Parisian air. The lights of the city twinkled around us, and I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. "You did it," Sophie said, her voice full of warmth. "You found yourself." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. For so long, I had been lost in someone else's story. But now, I was writing my own. And for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it would take me. As we stood there, watching the night unfold around us, I realized something. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore, least of all Charlotte. It was about embracing the person I had always been, the person I had hidden away for so long. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. This was just the first chapter of a story I was finally ready to live. The story of Ethan Winters is a powerful reminder that sometimes we need to break free from the shadows of others to truly find ourselves. For years, Ethan lived in the perfect image Charlotte crafted, playing the role of the supportive husband while his own dreams and passions faded into the background. But Paris became his turning point, a place where he began to peel back the layers of his life and rediscover who he was beneath it all. The most important lesson here is the value of self-discovery and the courage it takes to step away from what's comfortable. Ethan didn't just walk away from a toxic relationship. He walked toward his own life, his own purpose. It's easy to get lost in the expectations of others, to forget our own voice. But true freedom comes when we stop living for others and start living for ourselves. Ethan's journey teaches us that we're never too far gone to rewrite our story. Every step, every decision, no matter how small, can bring us closer to the person we were always meant to be. And when we finally take ownership of our own narrative, we're free. Free to live, free to grow, and free to become who we're meant to be.